repeat of 1983, with Thatcher winning south of the border once again, irrespective of what the Scottish people say in the ballot boxes. So we'll have more MPs, we'll have more logs in the log jam, but the log jam will be there just the same. And the challenge to our quality and ability in statecraft is how we break that log jam on behalf of the Scottish people. And it's to meet that future desperate situation that the concept of the Constitutional Convention is designed. It's designed to create the maximum unity in that type of adversity. But we will require another quality, which is very scarce and rare in Scottish political life, and that's the quality of statesmanship, where we've got to reach out beyond our own ranks, our own ideologies, and our own philosophy, and touch all other people in our society. Let's take, for example, the Scottish Conservatives. They're part of the present logjam and will be part of the future logjam. Now, I know that there's some folk in here think I don't bother about Scottish Tories, that I eat them for breakfast. Well, as the saying goes, some of my best friends are Scottish Tories. I don't eat them for breakfast, I invite them for political discussion at dinner. And I've been reading very carefully the coded messages that have been appearing in the correspondence columns of the Scotsman. And I've got to tell you, there are changes happening inside that institution as well as inside other institutions. There are significant people in the Scottish Conservative Party who are home rulers, not for independence, but let's not jeer and sneer and jibe at them. Let's not chastise them because they've a long way to go. Let us applaud them for already having come a long way from the unionist stable. We've got to have statesmanship to reach out and create the maximum unity the day after the next general election, when Scotland again faces a hostile alien government. The Constitutional Convention is a concept, not a detailed model, and deliberately at this stage, only a concept, not a detailed model. It's an instrument for creating national unity while catering for national diversity. It's a forum that allows everyone, whatever their position, to argue that position in a Scottish context with honour on their part. Unionists can fight for election to the convention as unionists, devolutionists as devolutionists, and we should be able and proud and happy to fight for our position of independence. And if we can do that, that would be an achievement of consummate statecraft. But whether we can do so depends upon the magnanimity within this party. The challenge in this motion is whether we are big enough to engage in an act of corporate statesmanship. Let's show Scotland.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, as is the wont of those who have pushed the idea of the convention for so long, neither the mover nor the seconder said in any way whatsoever how this thing would come about, what kind of beastie it is, and what in fact it's going to do. So I'd like to quote from an article that Jim wrote very recently, in which he says it would have the task of producing a self-government bill, of testing that bill in a referendum, and of presenting that bill for acceptance and implementation. But in the article, he didn't say to whom. Then he goes on to say this would be a full exercise of Scottish self-determination. So perhaps we have to look elsewhere to find out to whom that's to be presented. And I'd now like to quote Isabel Lindsay, who in an article in the Glasgow Herald prior to last year's conference, before the same convention was discussed, said, "It requires for its initiation only a very simple piece of Westminster legislation. It gives the government no excuses about lack of time, and our debate would not be inflicted on English MPs." So one would be led to assume that there is going to be a self-denying ordinance on the part of English MPs in discussing how much or how little self-government the Scottish people are going to have. Then again, when you move on to look at what the CSA says, the Campaign for the Scottish Assembly, who have pushed this thing possibly harder than anybody else, an organisation that would fall to bits if it were not for the active participation of many members of this party. The Convention would draft and present to Parliament a Scottish Assembly bill and would consider amendments to it proposed by Parliament. They goes on to say, we trust that MPs who participated in this convention would press in Parliament for the bill to be enacted, and we would hope that political parties would agree to give their full support to their MPs in this task. Can you imagine the fear and horror that that statement of political intent engenders in Thatcher and the establishment in Westminster? Self-determination now means nothing more than being granted the permission to talk about how little self-government we are prepared to accept. Jim Sillars, in his article in The Scotsman, said that a people riddled with self-doubt will seek a gradualist approach. After 277 years, ladies and gentlemen, how gradual do you want to be? He talks about our lack of statecraft. How many countries in the third world, in the continent of Africa, who took their independence, who just reached out their hand and took it, how many of them had any kind of practice in statecraft? We are talking about a people who have given generations of commercial, business, economic and political leaders to almost every country in the Commonwealth. And yet we are saying now that we lack the practice in statecraft to run our own country. 18 months ago, Jim was talking about competence. We have to impress on the people of Scotland that we have the competence to run our own country. We seem to have passed that test. Now we have to be competent in statecraft. What are we going to have when England says no in 10 or 50 or 75 years? The Convention does nothing but put back the debate. I have no time for devolution, as you well know. This is not even devolution. This would allow you to talk about devolution, but that's all it would allow you to do. You can have the discussions anywhere you like. You can have that body meeting in the Grand Committee in the Assembly building in Edinburgh. You can have the discussions in Westminster. You can have them on the moon. It doesn't make a blind bit of difference if they can't come to any decisions. The SNP, ladies and gentlemen, is a crusade. It's not just a political party. It is a crusade to engender in the people of Scotland the dignity, the self-respect and the self-confidence that will carry them to self-determination. If we for 1 minute suggest that we don't have the confidence to carry the people forward, how in heaven's name can we condemn the Scottish people themselves for not being prepared to take that step? I want to finish with a quote from Gordon Wilson. Twice at this conference, he said, independence should be at the forefront of the Scottish political agenda. And this morning he said that we want to make self-government a reality, not in 20 years, in 10 years, but by the next election. Ladies and gentlemen, all that a convention will do will allow you to talk about it by the next election, for the next 20 years. I move the direct negative.
Hey, yeah.